Are we ready to go? Oh, okay.
You're on camera,
I
you're
don't know
working
what time
already.
it is. I never wear a watch, so I never know what time it is. I'm tired.
You're late, get going.
Okay. Hi. I don't know if my name is Niniann. I don't know people here a few people that don't know me. I'm from New Hampshire, from almost near Dartmouth College, West Central New Hampshire, and I live at a place called Evanmore Gardens, and it's a 14-acre piece of land, and there's big gardens, big herb gardens, and also a small native plant sanctuary there. I'm a member of United Plant Savers, and about 10 years ago, I decided that I'd try to replace some of the native plants that should have been there, but because of logging and stuff, they've been wiped out. So I've got pretty good colonies established now. Some plants that are kind of rare, and I do like educational tours. People come to Girl Scouts. I've done elementary school, day camps. I drag things along to garden clubs and stuff like that. And I'm retired. I worked at a hospital for a lot of years, and for the visiting nurses and for Head Start. And so now I'm retired, and I'm what I call a community herbalist. That means you're a poor herbalist because you don't get paid. But I do donate. I do free workshops and free classes, and I make up different kinds of herbal mixtures and teas and tonics and stuff, and I just pretty much give them out to people who need them that can't afford them. And I do free herbal consultations and things like that. So that's what I do in my spare time. So I don't have any spare time anymore. I'm busier now than when I worked for a living, but I love doing it, so it's kind of like a labor of love. So anyway, today, what we're gonna do is we're gonna blend some incense that is especially made, it's very good for an offering incense, for whatever spirits or deities you work with. It makes a nice devotional offering, or you can use it in a ritual. It's just the incense for that ritual. So you can get a lot of different uses out of it. But I call it an offering incense because it's a lot of herbs that were traditionally used as incense or in some way over the ages. So they have a long history and a lore about them. And in fact, incense has been around. I mean, they found incense in the tombs in Egypt, and it's been around a long time. It's got a long history of religious use, religious and spiritual use, and for health purposes too. I know that it's kind of strange. It's to point out, you can take like almost any religion and then another religion that have nothing, hardly, you'd say they have nothing in common, but they'll both burn incense. So that's what I mean. It seems to be a natural thing with mankind to find nice smelling, sweet smelling plants and resins and offer them up as offerings to their deities. Today, we're going to explore the lore of some of these herbs and why I picked those out. We'll be working with 12 separate herbs, and we're going to make an herbal and spice incense that's just a loose incense. This is not self-combusting, so you'd have to put it on charcoal. And you've probably seen these a million times. They sell them online, or you can buy them in shops. It's a little charcoal bricks that you burn them on. Some people have problems with those charcoal discs, in which case they sell these online. You can find them. They're called DOP, P-H-O-O-P coals, and they're made from pressed herbs and a little bit of wood, so that they're easier on some people who have a hard time with the charcoal. So you might want to try these, and they're not expensive. But I think this whole pack was $4 or something. Then if you were going to burn them on charcoal, you would need some kind of an incense burner. This is an old, I think it's from a Chinese restaurant. You know, when you get the little things they heat up, little strips of food and stuff. But they sell incense burners. You can use even just a bowl that you put salt in the bottom of. You can put your charcoal on top of that and burn it. if you're gonna burn the incense on the charcoal, you wanna just use little bits at a time. Don't, if you throw a bunch on, it'll smother the fire, the coal, it might put it out. Or it would be just all smoke, and, you know, be setting off the fire alarms and stuff. The other thing I tell people is if for some reason, if you have asthma or something like that, and you can't burn incense, you can take this particular incense, it would be very good to sprinkle around your front doorstep or in your garden. Or just, and then while you're doing that, to consciously offer it as an offering to good spirits to come and protect your property or your garden, that kind of a thing. So you can use it either way. You can either use it as something to sprinkle or to burn. Let's see. Some of these are sweet smelling. They're very pretty, they have a nice scent to them. And some have hardly any scent at all. When I work with herbs and I work with, you know, for incense or any kind of spiritual purpose, I don't just use the herbs that smell pretty. I use the ones that have long traditions and lore about them. So it might not necessarily be an herb that's, like vervain has literally no smell, but I just use a pinch of it because that herb has a long tradition of magical religious uses. The Greeks used it to purify their altars. It's been around for thousands of years. So some incense ingredients might not even really smell. So you kind of use a balance. You use a balance. You would like pick ones that are sweet or fragrant smelling, and then you can always throw in little pinches of symbolic kind of herbs for that purpose. And that's what we did. That's what we're doing here today. Now you can grow your own herbs and dry them, which is really, if you ever get a chance to do that, even if you just grew three herbs, okay? It's an amazing difference to me when you grow your own, you dry it, you grind it, you put all your energy into it. It makes a complete difference. It really is more powerful because it's got so much of you mixed in with the plant. And when you're working with even this, dried material here, you have to remember they aren't just little green bits. They're gifts of a living being that were grown and harvested. So you always have to really respect the plant and realize that each of these ingredients here is from a plant that's a spirit, that has its own spirit. And so you always want to be respectful and honor that spirit when you're working with herb plants, or you're working with even just the dried material. So treat the plant or the materials with respect. The other thing is, it's really a good idea to be careful of your source, all right? It's not always a good idea. I mean, I have in a pinch, if it's an emergency. I've used, herbs from the supermarket, like I absolutely had to, I had no choice, But you want to, if you're going to really seriously work with herbs, it's a good idea, even if you can't grow them, to stock up with some basic ones and get like really good organic herbs that weren't treated with toxic chemicals or anything like that. So like these are a combination of dried ones I grew and ones from Mountain Rose Herbs, which is online, you can order from. And I really think they're one of the best suppliers. Their stuff is either organic or wildcrafted, and they have a really good reputation. The company's really well known, and they actually have more reasonable prices than a lot of the companies that don't even sell organic herbs, which always kind of cracked me up. I was wondering about that. But that's what I would do. I would really I try to use the best quality herbs. If you're going to offer something to the gods, you want it to be the best quality you can find. The other thing is a wild plant which you harvested, or garden herb or flower that you can gather at certain times of the year or at certain moon times, can help boost that power that you're going to work with for that plant. And if you're going to work with a plant and you're going to harvest from a plant, I always bring a gift. and it can just be water. It doesn't have to be anything, you don't have to put crystals in the ground and silver and all that kind of stuff. Just good, clean spring water. We're really blessed at my house that we have our own spring that feeds our well. So our water is beautiful water. So sometimes I just take a nice pitcher of water out, and if I'm gonna harvest from certain plants, I give the plants water when I harvest from them. It's just, the more you can do to become self-involved with the plant, the more you're gonna get out of it. So today, we're gonna work with 12 herbs, and I decided 12, it's just because I like to work in multiples of 3. It's a Celtic thing. So you could easily have made a perfectly good incense with 3 of these ingredients, or 6 of them, and it doesn't even have to be 3, 6, or 12. You could do it with any number of ones that you want to. But today I decided with 12, so you could have 12 herbs you would get used to, you would learn about. So that would give you a good start. This way you can get familiar with the 12 herbs. Now, in old herbal lore, and I've read it in several places, but the one that I first saw it in was Greaves Herbal, which a lot of herbalists still use. They claim that 3 of these were very sacred to the Druids. And that was meadowsweet, which is this one right here. Meadowsweet. And where's the other one? Water mint, right here. It's a form of mint. And vervain, this one. Now, meadowsweet grows wild all over the place in New York, New Hampshire, a lot of places in the Northeast. You'll see it along the roadway, along ditches in June. Big white flowers blooming on bushy plants. And so it's pretty common. It grows in Europe, but it grows here too. Now water mint, okay. If you can't get water mint, you can use regular mint. But for this class today, I wanted to give you the chance to work with water mint, which would be more authentic that they would have used years ago. Well, most of our mints now are hybrids, But water mint, it actually grows near the water, and the only place I knew that it grew, I couldn't get to anymore. You can't get around like I used to. But there was a little island not too far from where I lived in a river, and this kind of mint grows all over it. But they don't sell this mint commercially in the United States. I had to send to Bulgaria for it. So it's really actual Mentha aquatica, which is not the same as peppermint. This is the wild mint. So that's what that is. And it's very, very strong smelling. I got it finally came in the mail like a couple of days ago, and it was obvious that, a strong smelling envelope from Bulgaria. They had opened it and resealed it. Somebody in the government, the post office, or somebody checked it out. But it's funny because as soon as I got the package at the post office, I could smell it, It's nice, got a nice minty smell to it. Now, vervain, this is the one that, it doesn't really smell, doesn't really have much of a smell, but it's got such a long religious, a history of religious use that it's considered a very kind of all-purpose, powerful herb, and that was one of the other ones that was used in what they called a Druid incense. Let's see.
Is the vervain different from the blue vervain?
I'm sorry, I'm hard to hear.
Is that vervain different from blue vervain?
Yes. Blue vervain is Verbena hastata, and it grows out west, a big, beautiful, tall plant with purple spikes of flowers. This is European vervain that wouldn't be hardy here. It's only hardy to zone 5 or 6. And it only gets about this big, and it's about maybe 16 inches tall, has a little spike of these soft sky blue flowers. I grew it just because I was curious. I wanted to see what it looked like, because I was like, why is this, it's got such a long history of use. I thought it would be some really spectacular plant, and it's this like little wispy the only thing is when you get a bunch of it, it makes like this blue haze. And blue was a very rare color in the plant kingdom. And a lot of times blue was associated with goddesses. So I guess I could see if you had a field of vervain growing wild, it would catch the eye of people in ancient times. And then I could see maybe that's why they decided they would tie it into bundles and use it to sweep the altar, to cleanse the altar psychically, that kind of a thing. And it was used in incense too. So this is actually European vervain. It's not the wild one from the United States. I've grown both, but this one I have to grow like an annual or bring it in for the winter because it won't winter over. That wildflower you're talking about is real tough, and you can leave that outside and it'll come back. It's a very pretty flower, and people substitute that for spiritual purposes, which is fine. But I wanted to, today, I just tried to get the really traditional, species, because you might never get to work with them again, They're not things that you can run up to the herb shop and find. So that's what I did with that. And so anyway, you might ask, well, why you want to make incense? Well, it's good. It's kind of good. It connects you to nature spirits, to plant spirits, which is part of our kindred, part of our tradition. And it also connects you to your ancestors, because it's been right down to modern day. I mean, the Catholic Church, they still use incense in religious ceremonies. So it's such a nice long tradition. So that's good thing to do with it. And I think that it's just, especially when you make it yourself, it's really a pleasing offering to the deities and the kindreds, the spirits that you work with. I think that the nice scent and the smoke is like when you're welcoming that spirit to your home or your grove or your ritual is very pleasing to the spirit. So it is a good offering. Let's see. So I'm gonna give you the sheets, and if you look on, I'll hand these out. If you look on page 4, pass these around. It starts the herb list of what these are. So the first one is chamomile, and this is a variety called German chamomile. And it's said to be under the influence of the sun and the element of fire. And it was traditionally used to honor sun deities. And it's supposed to transform negative energy into positive energy. And it was used to protect and to draw prosperity. And it also smells like apples. Kind of a nice apple scent to it. Cinnamon was been used since ancient times. They brought it in trade from the East, and it was one of the earlier spices. And oh my gosh, and by the Middle Ages, they were cooking everything in cinnamon. It was the rich man's, if you wanted to impress your lord when he came to dinner, you soaked the rabbit or the chicken in cinnamon or something. I'm not fond of it with meat dishes, but some people are. But it does make a nice incense. It's got a nice smell to it. It's also an herb that's considered under the influence of the sun. And it's burned to sanctify an area for spiritual protection. It's considered to draw prosperity. It's considered to be a healing herb and to raise psychic power and to bless the people that work with it. This is lavender, and there's many species of lavender, and any of them are fragrant and are good to use for incense. And by the way, I pre-ground all of these for you today, as much as my grinder would do. Normally, you would have to use a mortar and pestle when you make your incense, and it takes quite a bit of work. And a lot of times when I'm just making one little batch for me, I prefer to do it by hand, because that is that's really putting your energy into the incense. When you hand grind everything down, energy, because while you're doing that, you can be stating your intent and working it right in there. So, but for today, because I didn't want people to have to sit here for an hour grinding away, I ground these. So this is powdered lavender flowers. This is meadowsweet. Now, meadowsweet was another one of the 3 Druid sacred herbs, and it's an herb of love, peace, and harmony. It's the hippie herb, that's what I call it. And it was a favorite flower for weddings in the end of like July. It blooms mid-July to August in some places. And it's a very pretty tall herb. It also is a medicinal herb. It has the same ingredients that are in aspirin in willow trees that was used for healing for fevers and pain, things like that. This is the water mint we talked about earlier.
If I could throw something out there quickly, just it's one of the.
I gotta come over there. I'm hard of hearing.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
Something I want to throw out there quickly. It's one of the deities I'm devoted to. Anya is a Irish and sun goddess and territorial goddess who's associated with meadowsweet, and she's pretty much that's everything you described. That's pretty much her.
I know we do a big midsummer thing at my house every year with all the kids in my family, and that's one of the goddesses that we bring offerings to, and we bring flowers from the garden. I know that's one of my favorite goddesses too. Let's see. Oh, this is mistletoe, and it's the famed mistletoe from the Pliny's description of the ritual that the ancient Druids did, where they climbed up and cut the mistletoe that grows like a parasite in oak trees, preferably, and they would sacrifice white bulls, and they would make sure that the mistletoe didn't hit the ground. They would catch it in a basket or in the hides, and it was like very, very sacred to them, because first of all, it was considered like a real liminal type of magic, because it didn't grow on the ground, it grew up in the sky, it was kind of in between places, So they used it for healing a lot. In fact, it has been used in more modern day. They've had applications for it for tumors. And it's not something that you would ever want to do on your own, because you get very sick. Mistletoe can poison you, especially the berries. But
we can't fashion a dart out of it and throw it at people.
You would want to fashion a dart out of it and throw it at people, wouldn't you, Rob?
The Norse Balder death story.
Yeah, but yes, because that was an arrow that was made from the wood. It must have been a very old mistletoe bunch that the crippled god, I can't think of his name, they shot the arrow that Loki tricked him into.
Oh.
Yeah, okay.
The blind god, yeah.
Yeah, right, so that was mistletoe. But then there's mistletoe as a love herb too, because that's what people kiss under, because supposedly, wasn't it Freya made it after that it could never harm anything again. So then it became this love herb in more modern mythology. But it is an herb that, if you're going to work with it, like all herbs, you want to keep them out of reach of kids and pets. I have mine up on big tall shelves or in a room in the back of the house, so that, I don't have to worry. Well, my grandchildren know more about herbs than most grown-ups do, so they wouldn't eat anything without asking. This is mugwort. Mugwort is, one of the real witchy herbs, I mean, it's been used in all kinds of spell work and charms. It's supposed to encourage spirits to come when you burn it, because of the smoke that it puts up, and it's supposed to be a good protective herb, and it's supposed to help raise your psychic ability, and it's used in dream magic. And of all the different legends about it, the one thing that is true is that if you pick fresh mugwort and you put it next to your bed while it's still fresh, you go to sleep, you'll have like vivid dreams. It seems to make your dreams like psychedelic, really crazy dreams.
So a few people here have experience with this from something I've brewed, a mugwort working as a bitter in brewing a beer.
Right. Yes, it used to be very popular. That's why mugwort, you know,
Yeah.
mug herb.
But I know a few people here have tried my quote-unquote fairy beer,
Uh-huh.
which is mugwort and heather. And
Yeah, heather was an old ingredient in beer. Yes, definitely.
and they've had very interesting experiences with that beer.
Yeah. Well, you know, because this had there's all kinds of magical legends and superstitions and, you know, various stories about mugwort. But it definitely, I did one year, I harvested my mugwort, I hung it on the beam where I dry it, and it was the first year I lived in the cabin, and not thinking that my bed was right underneath it. And I had like the whole room stunk of mugwort, and I had the most insane dreams that night. I remember it distinctly because I woke up exhausted in the morning. I don't know what it did to my brain at night, but all that smell in the air was it really does affect you, you know? So I don't know about, I haven't really affected me just burning the incense like that, but the smell of the fresh herb really, it has something in it that definitely affects your brain. So anyway, that's mugwort. And this is just rose petals powdered, pink rose, and they're very fragrant. Roses have a long history of being associated with love and with psychic powers too. And they're a good part of the offering. This is rosemary. Rosemary is a real strong plant ally of mine. Ever since I was a little girl, I remember thinking, I told my grandmother rosemary smelled holy to me. It always smelled holy for some reason. And I don't know why, but I associated it with God and church or something. But that's not what they burn in church. They burn frankincense usually. But anyway, I love the smell of rosemary. I cook with it a lot. I use it in incense. And they even used it, it's been a long use in healing because it's good for your circulation. But they used to make like a tea with rosemary, and you would wash your hands with it before you worked with the sick because it would cleanse the bacteria from your hands. And it is actually mildly antibacterial. And it has a long history of being used for magical purposes and healing purposes. So that's rosemary like you would put in stuffing, you know, that people cook with pork and things like that. Thyme. This is, you know, regular garden thyme ground up. You can also use like the creeping thyme. That would have been more probably what they used in the old days would be the wild thyme grows all over Europe. And it just spreads along, you know, I have patches of it all over my garden. The bees love it. It's so good for the bees. I love growing it. The little purple flowers really, the bees really hang around it a lot. This is the vervain I told you about. It doesn't really have much smell, but it's just a traditional part of spiritual workings, magical workings, religious workings. And finally, this is yarrow. And yarrow was, I read that it was funny because it was associated with women, with women's magic and women's power. You might, a young man might pick yarrow flowers and give them to his mother for a gift as a kind of an honor thing. People might dry the yarrow and hang it in their house. You know, it has all kinds of medicinal uses too. People use it for colds, congestion, things like that, and teas. But it also has a history of spiritual and magical uses. You know, it was according to myth, Sharon used it, taught Achilles how to use it to treat wounds, and it has been used for that. But it was also thought to increase the metaphysical potency of other herbs used in incense and magical workings, because it does that in the garden too. Like I have a big herb garden, and I always plant yarrow in different places in the garden because it actually helps the other plants produce more oils. I don't know why. It just must react with it somehow. But they say if you grow yarrow in an herb garden, your herbs will be stronger flavored. So I do that. But that's also part of this incense today. So those are the 12 herbs we're gonna work with. And then when you get them into your little cups that you're gonna mix things with, I'll come around and I'll give everybody a little pinch of dragon's blood resin, powdered, because dragon's blood resin is supposed to help raise the potency of whatever mix you're making. So that's a traditional thing to use that for, so I'm gonna do that for you, and I'll give everybody a small crystal to put in their incense today to help hold the charge after you've charged it. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna come up, get a cup, and it's with a birch, these are birch wooden spoons, and you're gonna take, you're not gonna use this spoon though, not until you go to mix it at your table. You're gonna use the spoon in front of the container just for that herb. We don't wanna cross-contaminate them, okay? And what I ask people to do is to come up and don't open them up and stick your hand in the jar. Instead, kind of tilt it down a little bit, then open it up and take your spoon and use your spoon in the jar, because we don't want to contaminate the herbs. And that's how you get it. You get out one spoonful, nice round heaping spoonful, put it in your cup, okay? I know it's tempting because they're so good. Please don't stick your face right over the jar and take a deep breath. You're liable to have it go in your lungs and hurt your lungs seriously, because they are powdered. So you don't do that. Don't stick your nose right up in there. And the other thing too is to try to be really mindful and not be thinking of your grocery list and all that. Like, try to concentrate on what you're doing. And each of these herbs has an herb spirit. And when you come up and you take your spoonful, I want you to be thinking like of the chamomile spirit and asking mentally in your head if that chamomile spirit will help you make your incense today. Because you have to let the spirits know what it is that you want from it. If you don't let them know what it is that you want from, it might not be as strong. It's going to be better if you are concentrating as you go down the row and thinking on. Now, at home, I actually sing to them. You know, I sing to them, or I might have little poems I make that I say to them. But here today, there's this crowd of people, and we're all in this room. So we're not going to be singing and stuff to our herbs today, although you could do it in your head. We're just going to say a simple sentence to greet the herb and ask to help us in making our offertory incense. So when you go down and you get all 12 of them, then go ahead and sit down and take your wooden spoon and mix them really, really well. Get it completely blended as much as you can. And I'll start coming around and giving you each a little 1/4 teaspoon to put in with your mixture, okay? And then when everybody's got all their mixtures all mixed up, then you'll put your crystal in, okay? And then we'll charge them. We'll hold our cups and we'll charge them. So if you want to start coming up and grab your cup. Did everybody get one of these? Yeah, okay. Yeah, come up and grab one of those cups and start going right down the line. Make sure you put the spoon right back and the lid on so the next person knows what spoon to use. And like I said, don't stick your nose right over the top. Really is not good to be inhaling powdered herbs. And just put your spoon back down when you're done so that the next person can use it. So go ahead and start. And just grab your thing. Now, what you want to do is, when you grab your cup there, before you take off to go do your herbs, take one of those magic markers and just on the cup lid or the cup or something, put today's date and put offertory incense. Because you always want to label, you always want to know, because, well, like at my house, I got 10,000 jars, you know, so I don't want to get it mixed up. It's always a good idea to put the date you made something and what it is. So there's markers right there. So go ahead and start. I'll do it, I'll show her. Did you write